Welcome to the Asian Connection Mortgage Podcast, where we connect Asian Canadians together to talk about anything related to real estate, mortgages, and finances, based out of Vancouver. Our host is John Lee, mortgage broker with Arise Mortgage. Grab a bubble tea and enjoy the episode.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Asian Connection Mortgage Podcast. How's it going? Today I have a special guest, Julia Lin, with me today. How's it going, Julia?
Hi, John. It's going well. How are you?
Pretty good. Thanks so much for joining us on this special episode. Um, Before we start, perhaps you can just share with us a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Sounds good. Well, thanks for having me. First of all, it's actually my first podcast, so it's a little bit nerve-wracking, but exciting at the same time. But thanks for having me. A little about me. I am a corporate lawyer by trade. I've been practicing law for, gosh, I think 13 years now, which is insane.
Oh, you
Um,
started when you were in elementary school?
Thank you. You're very sweet. That would have been because we're the same age, so you would know. That's
Yeah.
very nice. That's very nice of you.
Oh yeah, we were hustling like back in grade five.
Yeah, that's right. Tell it. It's one of those everyone knows that you're going to be a lawyer because in elementary school you're like bossing people around. But no, like yeah, it's been a good over a decade now, and so you see my little logo up here, Julia Lin Law. I started my own practice about 6 years ago, and we primarily assist business owners, so small business owners and regulated industry professionals, like such as yourself, realtors, doctors, all that type of service provider group, with all things corporate law, basically corporate and commercial law and corporate law and like contracts and things like that.
Got it. So when you were growing
Yeah.
up, were your parents like you can either be a doctor, accountant, lawyer, and then you pick lawyer?
No, actually, so not at all like that.
Oh,
I think
they're great parents then.
yeah, actually, well, I'm the youngest of three, so maybe I didn't get as much pressure with the different types of professions, but I always wanted to be a teacher, actually. So I
Oh,
think maybe there's a bit of an element of that, right, with what I do now, but I always thought I would be a teacher. Um, and then, actually, funny story, not a lot of people know, but I did undergrad at SFU in communications, and I thought, oh, maybe I could go and do journalism or marketing. But then I had some friends going, applying for law school or taking the LSAT at the time. And I guess I really just didn't know what I wanted to do. So I ended up just writing the LSAT. And it kind of tunnel vision from there. But at that point in time, when I was still figuring out what I wanted to do as a career, we did have a family friend who's a fortune teller, like a Chinese fortune
oh,
teller.
interesting.
He's since passed away. He's a uncle. But he was like, well, she's no good in math. She's not going to go into sciences, so maybe she should just be a lawyer.
But how did he determine it? Was he like doing the palm or looking at your face feature? Like what
Yeah, it's like the in Chinese it's bazi, right? Like you're looking at your birth chart.
oh,
And I believe at the time he said like I was always good with more like languages and people and communication, and obviously my undergrad degree aside, he always felt like I was very social, and I guess through my reading, I'm like a people's person but also kind of like a teacher. So
mhm.
he's like, oh well, in terms of those Asian family professions, that was like by default the only one I could choose.
You know what? You know what happened? It's probably like before the appointment, your parents went in
Right.
5 minutes earlier. It's like, here's $20. Just say you're a lawyer.
And it's funny because throughout law school, when things are really hard, and sometimes I'd be like maybe crying to my mom on the phone,
Yeah.
and then my dad would overhear about me like being upset. He would sort of go back and blame the fortune teller uncle, like, oh, why did he tell her to go to law school? And then after I became a lawyer, he was like, oh, my daughter's a lawyer, so typical Chinese family. So yeah, so
It's been
that's the background.
So it's been like, yeah, six years of your own firm, 10 years or more as a lawyer. Any
Hmm.
stories that you want to share throughout this whole entire process?
Oh gosh, yeah. I mean, I think in terms of memorable, in terms of the process and journey, I would say going from working for somebody else and deciding to quit that previous law firm I was working at because I was quite unhappy at the time. It just didn't feel like the right atmosphere and all the things. So deciding to quit and at that point in time, I wasn't sure if I wanted to continue practicing law, to be honest. And I was thinking of maybe starting a business, but I didn't know what I could do. So I actually quit and did a little bit of soul searching at the time. And then, so transitioning about a year after that, 2019, deciding to start my own practice, like that's obviously like a core memory because I of just that transition from employee to business owner and deciding to take the leap, which I'm sure like you can relate to as well. Just yeah. And then in terms of memorable like clients and different matters that we've had over the years, gosh, like we service so many different types of industries, but I think maybe one that comes to mind just more recently is because we're actually still handling it right now is um, restaurant business client. So those are always fun for me because I'm a big foodie and really, really passionate about food. So whenever we have some restaurant business clients, it's always exciting because obviously we're helping them with the back end, like setting up the corporate structure, um, getting investors in properly, papering all the things. But it's always exciting because after this is all done, I can't wait to go actually try the food at the restaurant. So that's kind of top of mind, more memorable right now. Yeah.
So I believe you're from Taiwan, is that correct?
Yeah. I
And
was born there.
yeah, you're born there. So if you were to pick a place to live in Asia for the rest of your life, would it be Taiwan or would it be somewhere else?
Oh, that's a tough one. So, like, if I had to choose and just like relocate and live there, right?
And you have money, so like you don't have to worry about job. It's just more of the environment. Which
Yeah.
one of
As much as I love going back to Taiwan, I don't know that I would choose Taiwan. Um, it, it might be somewhere in Southeast Asia, to be honest, like maybe like Bali or somewhere in Thailand. I don't know why I say that. Maybe, I mean, I'm inclined to pick Japan because I love going to Japan too, but I feel like it's more of a you just want to try to visit as much as possible, but you may not want to live there sort of thing.
Oh, true,
Yeah.
yeah.
I don't know. I don't
Just the
know.
hustle bustle, right?
And in Japan, I think you're because I have lived in Japan before. I've lived there for 7, 8 months before law school, like in between undergrad and law school. And it was such a great experience. But I think long term, you're more or less still treated like a foreigner, no matter how long you've stayed there. So I think in that aspect, I think I'd rather just be visiting. But yeah, maybe Southeast Asia because it's kind of fun. You can meet a lot of other, you know, expats from other countries. And
Mhm.
yeah, so
Cool. Yeah.
yeah.
I that's kind of where I would pick too.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
and I guess there's a reason why there's lots of expats there because people who relate with us or live in the Western countries, then they like that maybe that weather and also the that's probably the cheaper food. That's probably
Yeah, I think it Asia, like just even looking at, Taiwan summers and in Japan, Hong Kong, China, all the places, and Korea too, like it's super hot. So I'd rather if we're gonna deal with that type of humidity, I'd rather be in like a more tropical climate where tropical like culture
Mhm.
where maybe it's more beachy and things instead of just being stuffed up in a smoggy city.
Mhm.
And then obviously your money goes further, the food. And I think just that pace of like maybe slowing down and being more spiritual in a way, like some of these places. Yeah. So,
Cool. Well, thanks for sharing.
yeah.
So let's dive into our episode into today into our topic. So you're a corporate lawyer, and that That sounds quite general. Can you just share with us,
Yeah.
like, what exactly you do or what you specialize in, day out?
Yeah, sure. And I know, yeah, that term corporate lawyer, sometimes people might even ask, like, what does that really mean? Because it's kind of obscure. But yeah, like corporate law typically is to do with companies, like incorporated companies, and all the ins and outs to do with that, because there's laws created around the incorporation of companies and the maintenance of them. So that could go from small privately owned companies with just one shareholder all the way up to huge companies with a big board of directors and like thousands of shareholders, and eventually they go public. So the term corporate law could span that entire realm. But in terms of what I do, it's more focused on the small business clients. So we do everything from setting up their business structure, so for incorporating for them, their companies, for their business or holding companies, or maybe we're restructuring their companies, working with accountants to do tax restructurings to add like a holding company, for example. So that's quite common. um, and just all the other things that might happen to their company. So, for example, if they um, want to bring on new partners and do share purchases or share transfers, if they're adding on, if they want to change a share structure, because that's part of the restructuring, or say if they accidentally let their business or their company get dissolved. Um, so we have to like restore the company, or dissolving the company because they don't want it anymore. So all those things fall under the corporate law umbrella.
Got it.
Mm-hmm.
I hear lots of people who run a small business and they uh, are sole proprietor. They don't have incorporation yet.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and the question is always like, okay, should I incorporate or just keep doing what I'm doing? Because once they hear incorporation, they just hear added costs. They have
Yeah.
to open the company, and now they have to not just file their own taxes, but file like their corporation taxes. But then yet so many people still incorporate. So there's gotta be some benefits or advantages to incorporating. So can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So how we how I usually approach this question is I explain that there's really two key benefits to incorporating. So the first one is that you can limit your liability. So essentially, when you set up a company, when you incorporate this company, it's a separate legal entity from yourself as a person. So if you're a sole proprietor, you can earn income, you can pay taxes, you can enter into contracts, you can get a loan, all those things. So, similarly, a company as a separate legal entity, once it's formed, it will also do all of those things. So, if you incorporate and then you transfer that business to your company to run, then essentially you're able to shield yourself from personal liability. And you know, if something went sideways with a client and they decided to sue, they'll probably try to sue everyone in the picture, but generally speaking, your company would be shielding you from that personal liability. So that's one big reason. And the second big reason is for the potential tax benefits, because essentially a company, the tax rate that it's taxed at with their income is quite a bit lower. So for sole proprietor, it depends on how much you earn each year with the different tax brackets that people land in. But a company in BC, essentially, you're looking at 11% tax. Um, so yeah, so we usually start there for the conversation, right? But like you said, you know, it 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 the cost, like yeah, for sure, like you have to do a corporate tax filing. There's the costs upfront to incorporate the company and to maintain the company. So it just really depends on a case by case basis whether those two benefits actually apply to that sole proprietor or not, because often like sometimes it might not, because sometimes maybe they're not earning enough to justify the tax savings just yet, or sometimes um, they're not able to shield their liability through having a company. And that's the case for professionals like yourself and me, where say through, if you're incorporated, like or to run your mortgage business, or I have a law corporation, we actually can't shield our personal liability through our companies. And I think that's one thing that people are not aware of. Yeah, so it really depends on each person's situation and what business they're in.
Got it. So for someone who is considering incorporating their business, and they're just weighing the pros and cons, like is there kind of like a rule of thumb where, no, you mentioned making enough. Like
Mm-hmm.
what's enough? Is it 50,000, 100,000? Like is there kind of like a ballpark number that one should start considering incorporating once they kind of hit that revenue or profit?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And it's something we get asked all the time. And accountants get asked this question a lot too. And I would say it still really depends. But yes, I would say there is a range where if you're anticipating starting to trend towards that year after year, usually it's that once you start hitting the six figures,
Mhm.
uh, then for sure you should be speaking to likely an accountant first to chat about whether it makes sense for you to incorporate for tax purposes. The reason why I say it depends is because it's not so much how much you make, it's more how much are you able to save if you weren't paying all these taxes to CRA? Like, are you going to be spending it all personally anyway, like the after tax income? Because if so, sure, like if you incorporate a company and you get taxed at 11%, which is awesome. But if you're going to turn around and take all that money out for personal use anyway, it kind of defeats the whole purpose,
Mhm.
because there's this adjustment anyway. Like once you take it out for personal use, you have to get taxed on a personal level. So really, like when people say incorporating saves you taxes, I would say it's more like it defers the taxes payable, because the idea is the more retain earnings, or the more cash, like after tax cash, you can continue to keep in your company, instead of taking it out, the more beneficial it is, because then that way you can kind of stagger drawing it out for your personal use. So yeah, I would say six figures, maybe that 120 to 150, you should really be thinking about it. So yeah, because say if your personal mortgage on a principal residence is like 8 grand a month,
Wait,
then
that was a lot, but actually very, very normal in Vancouver.
right, right. So if you're, that's the thing, is like if you're sure, maybe you're making 200, 300. This is just an example. Yeah, so 200, 300K predictable, like anticipated income, and then you're like, okay, absolutely have to incorporate. But you're going to turn around and like pull out all that money, and maybe you're a little bit frivolous with your personal spendings. Tax write-offs aside, of course,
Yeah.
it's really blurry, right? It's a blurry area, but because I know probably lots of business owners
Taking
might
your
be
clients
watching.
out for drinks, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, that's you're eating too. Your meal is that's it's taken care of. So it's a bit blurry, but yeah, I think that once you're starting to hit that point where you're like, gosh, like if I wasn't paying this to CRA, I'd actually be saving quite a bit of it. That's when you should really start considering it for the tax benefits.
Now to set all this up, what would be the actual cost? Um, I know costs can range, and
Mhm.
of course inflation as well. Like so, we do expect fees to go up, but perhaps if you can kind of give a ballpark, maybe a range, where someone wants to incorporate, like who they need to pay and approximately how much in total they should anticipate.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, I can sort of speak on behalf of obviously my firm, but just general idea, I would say, because most law firms, I would say they flat fee their corporations. I don't know if I've ever come across law firms that charge hourly for incorporations. I'm sure they still are out there, but most law firms nowadays, I think predictable flat fee is the way to go. But uh, so say if you do decide to go with a law firm, which I highly recommend, obviously I'm biased, but there's just lots of issues that can go wrong if you don't go through a lawyer. But let's just say if it's like a sole shareholder, like one owner incorporation, I think you can kind of expect a range of maybe around like 1200 to 1500 ish um, for fees. And then you have your BC registry filings and all those that we call disbursements or expenses. And then you have taxes. So unfortunately, legal fees are GST and PST.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, I know.
I'm
So
just
it's
only.
yeah, yeah, it is. So that actually, once it's added in,
Yeah.
it jumps quite a bit. Yeah, so I think so I would say it's in that range. So that's the upfront cost of setting everything up. So that would include, um, obviously all the different advice that would go into it. If you wanted to loop an accountant in, if you have one, and to chat with the accountant on what share structure is good to set up in that case. That's I'm kind of speaking on how our firm operates is that. So everything, all the correspondence that goes into setting up the company, all your questions, it's all included. And of course, the paperwork itself, the incorporation filing itself, and then we create like a electronic minute book at the end, because that's something that's actually mandatory for those of you who don't know that. So yeah, so all the things that would go into it. And then in terms of maintenance, on the legal side, there's annual maintenance involved. So usually that's once a year. There's some filings to be done and some documents to be signed. So typically you can expect about 300 to 400, depending on the law firm again, but annual fees. And then on the accounting side, of course, John, like you referred to earlier, there's a corporate tax filing each year now that needs to be filed, and likely bookkeeping if you are getting consistent bookkeeping done throughout the year. So that's the bulk of it, yeah, for maintenance.
So someone hears that and they might be like, okay, yeah, no problem. I'll go ahead. But there are some people who are like, 13 to $1,500. You know what? I'm just gonna go on YouTube, DIY it.
Yeah, for
And I'll
sure.
just go online and click, 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 and we're all good. Um, so I'm sure there are some people who have done that, and
Yeah.
then they actually come back to you because maybe they made a mistake or something. What would you say would be like the most common mistakes or oversights when people who DIY it themselves?
Yeah, and to be fair, I think it's completely understandable that people want to DIY the incorporation, because obviously, especially if they're starting a new business, they want to save costs up front. Lots of Facebook groups or maybe YouTube videos will say, "Oh, you don't need a lawyer; you can just do it yourself." Or maybe some accountants even say, "Oh, let me do it for you." But the thing is, it's easy enough to go online and file an incorporation with BC Registry, or even if you're incorporating federally on the federal website. That part is very easy. That part takes like 2 minutes, right? But what's missing often is all the actual documents that's required under what we call the Business Corporations Act, and that's the law that governs companies in BC. And without that, technically you can say that you don't have a proper company formed. If you're not documenting proper shareholders, resolutions, the different registers that are not now required. A transparency register is a common one nowadays. It's a newer requirement by the BC government. So things like that, right? So yeah, so we have had to fix a lot of DIY things. So I would just, I guess, caution that if you are anticipating that you might need your company, you might need like a loan, for example, you need to go to like a third party lender, or you're bringing on partners later on, or you anticipate like selling your company down the road, like just try your best to do it properly the first time.
Yeah.
Or if you really had to do it yourself just to save some cost, at least get it fixed by a law firm later. Doesn't matter if it's later, like a year from incorporation, 2 years down the road, at least you're kind of taking the steps to get it updated and everything recreated properly. Because you might run into issues where it's like a timing thing where, for example, like the lender is not going to is not going to fund the loan unless all the minute book is up to date. That's a common one.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Now, for companies that started, I'll say 5 years ago, and when they started, they were making decent money, but now the growth is just getting out of hand, and it's a good thing, and it's just growing so quickly. Um, and they come to you for some advice. Like, are there different ways to structure or set up in a way that can accommodate like bigger growth in the future?
Yeah, so you're thinking, is it like a company that's maybe just privately held, say by the operator and maybe just family members, or is
Yeah,
it like
yeah. Same,
multiple partners?
same. I guess similar to what you work with. So it's like still small business, but
Hmm.
yeah, before they're making 100K and they incorporate it, and now it's like 800 to 1 million, and
Right,
there's just more and more money that they're just leaving in the corporation. Um,
right.
what can they do, and is there something that they should be doing to
Hmm.
better facilitate this growth?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say the first thing that comes to mind is more on what are some tax planning aspects that can be done. And of course, as a lawyer, I don't give the tax and accounting advice, but at this point in time, I would suspect this business already has a dedicated accountant. So hopefully, they're always checking in and kind of having reviews year after year on, okay, like, is this company what we usually call opco, like operating company?
Mhm.
Is my opco at a point where, gosh, like we're retaining just too much cash in there, I don't know what to do with it? Should I buy a rental property in this opco, or what should I do? Like, how
Mhm.
do I maximize the value of all this cash sitting there, which is an awesome problem to have, obviously. um, but usually at this point in time, the accountant would maybe suggest like a restructuring to either add like a holding company, like a separate incorporated company where um, it's a little bit, I mean, we won't get into the too much detail about it, but essentially, if you were to add a holding company into the mix, you would be able to move the retained cash inside the operating company up to the holding company on a tax-free basis, actually. As long as the two are owned by the same ownership,
Mhm.
you can actually flow the money up tax free. And then the holdco would go off and do investments, whereas the opco continues to run the company. And that way you keep it separate. Opco, you keep like a nice amount just to pay like marketing and pay your employees and, working capital dollars inside there. But everything else goes to holdco and you can go off and do whatever you want. So that way, also, it keeps liability separate too, because OPCO is still at a risk of being sued, right? You have clients, you have contracts in OPCO, whereas HoldCo is purely just for investments. So that's a common one that's done. Sometimes it might even involve more complex planning, like a family trust. So those are usually hand in hand with like a tax planning accountant, maybe even a tax lawyer that would help with that. So yeah, it really depends. But I think number one thing is to make sure you have advisors to um, kind of be ahead a little bit, and just to be able to plan or to anticipate or to suggest certain things. And then my job would be to paper the thing on behalf of the company. Yeah.
No, no, thank you for sharing so much and explaining how, creating incorporations and all that work. Um, we covered quite a bit, but is there
Mm-hmm.
any other advice or any other tips that you're able to offer for those who are listening right now?
Yeah, I would say like in terms of even going back to like, if you're wondering whether or not you should incorporate, whether it's the right time or um, I think just it's always encouraged to chat with either a corporate lawyer like myself or an accountant if you're able to. Account what we a question I get a lot is like, who do I talk to first, and how involved does that other advisor have to be throughout the whole process? Which is a really good like context question.
Mhm.
And I would say oftentimes I might end up talking to a potential client first just to explain a general context, sort of like on this call today, where I'm kind of giving some overall context. And then if they don't have a dedicated accountant yet, they don't have to be in a rush to get one. It can always be a little bit later. But I think just having some advisors who you're able to reach out to, even just to have a free chat, like we give free initial discovery calls, just to scope out what it is, like where they're at and what we can potentially help them with. And that gives you more information. And when you have more information, you can make better decisions. So I just think that's one thing. And then for maybe the DIY incorporated clients, which obviously are out there, and that's totally fine. I also would say, don't hesitate to reach out for a consult just to understand like maybe what are the repercussions of not doing it properly. Like, do you anticipate some transactions coming up later that you don't want to be scrambling to kind of get this cleaned up before those things happen? Yeah, so because I think maintaining your company long term properly is like quite crucial. And I know it's boring and convoluted, but this is why there's other people like professionals who will help you do it and you don't have to worry about it. And lastly, for the DIY clients, make sure that even if you're not planning to fix up your corporate records and have it up to date, please make sure every year you're filing the annual report with the BC registry. That is a very crucial step where you're telling the government essentially that, hi, like my company is still here, I'm actively running it. Because if you miss the filing 1 year, you're in not good standing, they call it. But if you miss the filing 2 consecutive years in a row or more, the government will send you warnings. And if you don't receive them, which sometimes people don't receive them, they go into the spam box in their email. The government will strike down your company, like they'll dissolve it. So, and this has happened to many people, is they incorporate themselves and they have no idea of these obligations. So that is something I would definitely, like, even if you're not intending to, hire a law firm to help maintain, like make sure you do that step yourself.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much. So for those who don't have a corporate lawyer and they're looking into incorporating, what's the best way to reach out to you?
Yeah, you can find us. So Julia Lin Law, like it's not a creative name, but it's just me because I'm still like I have my paralegal and my legal assistant, but I'm still our only lawyer. So you can just reach out to us either through the website, julialinlaw.com. We're also on Instagram. You can reach out by email to hello@julialinlaw.com. Yeah, so those are all the different ways.
Cool. And we'll also have all that information in the show notes as well. So feel free to take a look and contact Julia for any questions.
Yeah, of course, happy to. Like I said, it's always good to chat. And it's my way of also just connecting with other business owners because now I am one as well, right? So just there's a lot of commonalities and shared like entrepreneurial journeys. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Especially for those who own a restaurant, right? Definitely.
Yes, that's right. Oh, I want more restaurant owner clients because it's fun.
All right, great chatting with you, Julia.
Yeah, thanks for having me. That was really fun.
All right, take care.
Okay, take care. Bye.
Thank you for tuning in. If you enjoyed today's episode, please consider giving us a review and subscribing to our podcast on your favorite platform. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time on the